Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Greetings from Dakar, Senegal. My name is Tatiana Nikitina, Regional Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation Advisor for Western Central Africa with UNFPA. It is my honor and real pleasure to moderate today's Future of Evaluation Dialogue on Human Rights Day. Today feels special because we have come together to reflect on human rights. This session invites us to look into evaluation as a practical tool to promote dignity, inclusion, and accountability. A very warm welcome to everyone, evaluation practitioners, champions, and managers. And a special welcome to our young evaluation colleagues and youth activists. Now, I would like to greet Sabas Monroy, former co-chair, UNEC Working Group on Gender Equality, Disability Inclusion and Human Rights, Evaluation Program Manager Officer with UN Human Rights, and a panelist of the previous fourth dialogue.
Thank you very much, Tatiana. Yes, a couple of weeks ago, we were here talking about evaluations and the contribution of evaluations to eliminate gender-based violence. Now it's an honor to be here in the Human Rights Day to pass the torch virtually, so you can go ahead with this important dialogue on evaluations and human rights. This is the torch. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Sabas, for passing the eval torch. I'm honored to carry it forward as we reflect on the evaluation, on how the evaluation can champion human rights, dignity, and equity. All right. So why are we here today? To commemorate the anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, adopted by the United Nations General Assembly on the 10th of December, 1948. Human rights are very special because they belong to every person everywhere without exception, because they protect our dignity, freedom, and safety, because they remind us that every voice matters and every life is equally valuable, because they are the foundation of peace, inclusion, and equality, because in times of crisis, they help us stand up for those who are most at risk of being left behind. Human rights are universal, inalienable, and they deeply interlinked. We all know that. This also means that when one right is violated, others quickly follow. That is why human rights must be protected as a whole. Yet today, many of the rights we take for granted are under pressure. Shrinking civic space, setbacks in democratic values, ongoing conflicts, and deepening global polarization. Today, we come together to reflect on human rights, and even more so on how the evaluation can play a critical role in protecting them, advancing them, and making them real in people's lives. Through evaluation, we can uncover inequities, bring invisible groups into focus, and ensure that every life truly counts in developing and implementing policies and programs. Today's dialogue explores how evaluation methodologies can be aligned with human rights principles, participation, non-discrimination, accountability, and the imperative to leave no one behind. Before we start, let me quickly walk you through the agenda. We'll begin with a brief opening round to hear from each of our panelists. Next, I'll introduce a bold statement, and we'll take a live poll on it, which will lead to a moderated debate. Then we'll move into a short deep dive with focused questions and open the floor for audience reflections. We will continue with 30-second rapid-fire takeaways from our panelists, and we will end with brief closing remarks from each speaker. Dear audience, you can post your comments and questions using the Q&A button in the Zoom. And if you are watching us on LinkedIn, please do share your thoughts. We will carry your questions and comments into the discussion. Okay, so with this, let us introduce our panel of very respected guests. Claudia Olavarria former co-chair, Evil Youth Latin America and the Caribbean.
Good morning, Tatiana. It's a pleasure for me to be here.
Good morning, Claudia. Welcome. Jennifer Worrell, Chief of Strategic Planning, Program Management Evaluation and Change Service at the OHCHR, Human Rights Agency. Okay, welcome, Jennifer. Sanjeev Sridharan, Professor with the University of Hawaii, USA.
Good morning from
Welcome,
Hawaii.
Sanjeev.
Pleasure.
Welcome.
Thanks, Tatiana.
And Hauhela Moshia Molebatsi, Senior Evaluation Specialist, Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation, South Africa.
Good afternoon, Chair, and good afternoon to fellow panelists and participants.
Okay, so we are all here, and with this, let us move on. Dear panelists, do you agree that evaluation is key to realizing universal human rights? We'd love to hear your views on this central topic, along with concrete examples and your thoughts on the shifts and challenges we need to address going forward. Each of you will have 2 minutes. And we start with Jennifer. Over to you, Jennifer.
Thank you, Tatiana, and thank you, colleagues in Eval Action, for organizing this important dialogue. Warm greetings to all on Human Rights Day. Before I get into responding, I have to welcome you to Human Rights Day. Today, we commemorate the adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which was adopted in 1948. We are using today to make a global call to uphold everyone's inherent freedom, dignity, and rights, regardless of their background. At the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, we feel that today is a reminder to all of us that human rights are universal and indivisible, and it is more important than ever today. With this theme, we are hoping, and the theme for human rights today is human rights, our everyday essentials. With this theme, we are hoping to connect people with their human rights by demonstrating how human rights shape our daily lives in ways we may not always notice. For example, human rights are in the food we eat, the right to food, the air we breathe, the right to a healthy planet, the words we speak, freedom of expression, and in the opportunities we pursue, for example, the right to education and the right to work. I invite everyone to tune into our online platforms, to interact with us, and to learn more about how human rights are indeed your everyday essentials, and the role you can play in supporting and promoting human rights. Now to the question. We all agree that realizing universal human rights is not simply a matter of adopting declarations or passing laws. It requires continuous monitoring, assessment, and improvement at the global, regional, and national levels. This is where evaluations become essential. Without the consistent use of evaluations, governments and institutions can claim compliance with human rights standards without actually meeting them. Across the human rights global ecosystem, evaluations repeatedly uncover systemic barriers and active discrimination on several grounds in a world where we are all born free and equal in dignity and rights. Evaluations tell us who is excluded and who benefits, who is voiceless, who has no access to services, and who is consistently being left behind. International mechanisms such as the Universal Periodic Review, the treaty bodies mechanisms reports, as well as the reports of national human rights institutions and NGOs, they all rely on rigorous evaluation to present accurate pictures of human rights conditions all over the world. They reveal successes, but they also reveal violations and failures. They uncover implementation gaps between policy and practice in all countries and provide an indication of the improvements that we need. They tell us whether states are upholding their human rights obligations, which helps rights holders, and here I mean the people and international bodies, to hold duty bearers accountable. I would say that evaluation is not just helpful, it is essential to realizing human rights for everyone, everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Jennifer, and I would like to invite Hauhela to express your opinion on this central question.
Thank you very much. In South African context, evaluation is not an optional technical exercise. It is a constitutional tool for accountability, fairness, and equity. Our national evaluation system was built to support a state of responsiveness, transparency, and committed realization to human rights. So at the core of the national evaluation system, we'd like to answer the following key questions. Are government programs in South Africa improving the lives, particularly of those that were historically marginalized? So through our national evaluation policy framework, which we will be releasing very soon, the 2025 one, we have strengthened the requirement for ensuring equity, gender, disability, so that evaluation not only measures the averages, but also exposes where inequalities persist. This makes the National Evaluation System of South Africa a practical mechanism for operationalizing the promise of leaving no one behind. Evaluation also helps government to correct course. It tells us why certain communities are repeatedly underserved, where policies unintentionally reinforces injustices, and how resources can be redirected towards poor, women, rural communities, and persons with disabilities. So yes, evaluation is essential to realizing human rights. It is how we ensure that communities do not remain commitments. Evidence becomes the bridge between policy intent and life experiences, and that bridge is what makes rights real in people's daily life. So that is the reason why we ensure that evaluation mainstream human rights throughout. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hauhela. And with these, we move to Sanjeev. Over to you, Sanjeev.
Thank you, Tatiana. Firstly, a pleasure to join you. I'm joining you from the island of Hawaii. Well, it's 3 a.m. here. That's significant to what I'm about to say. As I prepare to answer the question, is evaluation key to realizing universal human rights? I was looking for evidence. Show me the evidence that evaluations have actually made a difference. My own position is the question we have to ask is not just if evaluation is key, under what conditions do evaluation actually make a difference? A lot of evaluation is mechanical. A lot of evaluation is serving powers to be, or a lot of evaluation forgets whom it serves. So yes, it can be important, it can be key, it can be vital, but the question is, it's not inevitable. What are conditions under which it can be key? So the question we have to ask is, as a field, and I think we should consider ourselves a fairly young field. We should not pretend that we've been around forever. How do we bring in positional humility? The word for me as I answer this question is humility. How do we not forget who we serve? In my own work, and I see some of my colleagues there, work on brain health and mental health. Just finished to work with friends in Ontario Brain Institute and the Dancing with Parkinson's. And the question we have to ask in answering this question is, under what conditions will bringing an evaluative lens improve the lives of people suffering from Parkinson's disease or mental health or whatever your problem you're working on? And for that, I think, as we look at human rights, we also have to ask, what's the collective responsibility? In Hawaii, and I see a good Hawaiian philosopher friend who's there, we ask the question of kuleana. What's the overall social responsibility? What is the community's role? So it should not just be a mechanism of upward accountability. How do we make conditions better for folks whose lives we are intended to serve? And I think most significantly, how do we challenge our own imagination of programs? More often than not, brain health and mental health programs are not properly conceived. How do we ensure the fact that we recognize the interventions themselves are incomplete? How do we build a culture of nothing about me without me? And furthermore, can we also ask questions around, are our evaluation criteria sufficient to answer these questions? I'll leave it here. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanjeev. It was very rich, as all the previous interventions as well, I must say. So it will make my life of summarizing quite difficult to put all this wellness of thoughts into one simple sentence. But before we do this, I would like to ask Claudia to share your thoughts on this.
Many thanks, Tatiana, for the question. Many thanks, colleagues, for sharing your thoughts on this. And also many thanks to UNFPA for hosting such a relevant conversation today. I will do my best to add a complementary view after what my colleagues have just said. For 2 decades, we as a community have been working to install and consolidate evidence-based decision-making as a key tool for a stronger public action. In simple words, this means that the best way for states to address social, environmental, and economic challenges, among others, is to keep an eye on what strategies have worked or not in the past. It is an invitation to build on our own lessons and on the lessons of others when looking at the future. As simple as that. A big part of today's most pressing development challenges lies on the limited capacity of states as duty bearers to guarantee the rights of their population. So, the answer to your question, Tatiana, is absolutely. Evaluation, and especially the evidence-based policy making that should follow the evaluation exercises, is essential for the realization of human rights for everyone and everywhere, and even more so for those that have been left behind. For me personally, in my own practice, one of the main strengths of using a human rights lens to understand, to measure, and to value change is that helps clarify the relationship between right holders and duty bearers. Because it provides a framework to assess how people's everyday life experiences relate to the state obligations to guarantee rights. And it offers an undeniable, and hopefully will still be undeniable, standard for how each state must protect and contribute to the well-being of its people. That's all on my side, Tatiana.
Thank you very, very much, Claudia. And I like the final word of you said, how the state should protect and contribute to the well-being of their people. This is very powerful sentence. Thank you for finishing this round of exchange with this strong statement. Just a couple of words from myself to summarize. I was trying to take some notes, and I think the very short answer to the question whether evaluation is key to realizing universal human rights is that it's not only key, but it's also vital and it's also existential, but it should be done in the right way under the right conditions, as we heard. And we should examine those conditions to make sure that the evaluation really brings the change, promotes human rights and advance human rights, and helps the duty bearers to realize their duties towards their right holders, and then not exacerbate the poor situation of some of the vulnerable communities and vulnerable groups, so that if neglected, that can be falling even deeper into the gaps that they are and the difficulties that they are already facing. And I can be continuing to summarize, but I think we have many more interesting thoughts to hear from you and from our audiences and dear audience. Wherever you are, from wherever you are connecting to this webinar, please do share your comments and questions, either through Q&A button here in the Zoom or through the comments posting on the LinkedIn. All right, with this, we are going to move to the main part of our dialogue, the debate. As evaluators, we claim that evaluation promotes participation and equity. Yet, evaluation agendas are frequently shaped by donors, institutions, and political priorities. Those who face the greatest rights violations often have the least influence over what is evaluated, what evidence is produced, and the story it tells. And we heard Sanjeev very clearly alluding to this. Evaluation aspires to advance human rights, accountability, and justice, as both Hello and Jennifer and Claudio were telling us. But at the same time, it often remains a top-down, compliance-driven exercise. We operate within rigid systems, boxes, tight timelines, prescriptive methodologies, political sensitivities, and limited budgets. All these often prevent genuine engagement with those whose rights are violated. As a result, evaluation can reproduce biases and overlook structural factors that sustain inequity. At a time of global human rights rollback, evaluation can and should be a force for courage, exposing inequities, lifting marginalized voices, and challenging harmful systems. And this is what you have been saying in your opening remarks, each of you. Yeah, so I'm just sort of reiterating the importance of this thought. But if the evaluation reflects the same power imbalances, it can become part of the problem instead of solution. So we need to ask ourselves a difficult but essential question. Is evaluation truly advancing human rights or unintentionally reinforcing existing power structures? And this is the time for the life poll. We want your opinion. Our bold statement for today is, while evaluation is intended to advance human rights, its design and implementation often mirror the very power structures it seeks to challenge, thereby serving as a tool for compliance rather than a transformative tool for equity and the realization of rights. Please vote. Agree, disagree, or you may also have a nuanced view. We'll bring your responses straight into the debate. So you can get the QR code and you can start voting. Perfect. I see already some participants have shared your opinion. Very nice, interesting. And also to remind our audiences across the globe, please use the Q&A button. Please drop your comments if you have a nuanced response. We are keen to hear from you, your experience, and any additional insights that you might have. And if you're watching us on LinkedIn, please do share your thoughts as well. Okay, maybe just tiny bit more. Okay, we are moving. I see that more than 50% of participants have already participated in the poll. Let's give it another 20 or so seconds. Okay, we're almost at 60. A bit more to go. All right, going once, going twice, done. So let me put the results on the screen. I hope you can see it. So the 70% of the colleagues across the globe who are voted, they agree with the statement. We have 2% that disagree, and we also have some nuanced view, which accounts for 27%. I see the hands. We'll come back to you a little bit later. We have a dedicated Q&A session, and you will have a chance to say your question and get the answer to your question. So with this, I stop sharing, and we go to the next part of our discussion. Okay, yeah, let me close this. Fine. So now we would like to hear from our panelists. Let me repeat the question. While evaluation is intended to advance human rights, its design and implementation often mirror the very power structures it seeks to challenge, thereby serving as a tool for compliance rather than a transformative tool for equity and realization of rights. Dear panelists, what are your reflections on the results of the poll and the questions Please share your perspective and key arguments. And of course, you have time limits of 2 minutes per answer. Please feel free to react to one another and ask questions to keep the discussion lively and engaging. With this, I would like to invite Hauhela to start this important discussion.
Thank you very much. And I appreciate this provocative question in terms of whether evaluation can mirror power. But in the South African National Evaluation System, we are working actively to disrupt this dynamic. We do acknowledge that historically, some of the evaluations that we have undertaken were mainly compliance-driven or donor-driven, and with limited community voices. But in the recent years, and in particular with the new evaluation policy framework that we just concluded, we deliberately tried to address this challenge. We are shifting towards ensuring that we bring more community engagement in the whole evaluation process. So now we are making it mandatory to ensure that all evaluation that we undertake really include participatory theory change processes where stakeholders play a critical role. Ensure that during the design phase of our evaluation voices, we include rights holders to be part of the process. Also, we make sure that we're striving to ensure that we make our reports at the end of the day quite transparent, timely publishing them, and also making mandatory improvement plans to be developed to ensure that we address the recommendations. And in this way, we think that this will assist us in ensuring that the evaluation really lead to change because we are bringing on board the voices of the citizens to be part of the whole evaluation process. We believe that evaluation becomes transformative when it changes both what we measure and who gets to define what matters. So our goal is to ensure that evidence strengthens fairness, reduces exclusion, and amplifies the voices of those who are too often invisible to the policy space. This is our ordinary citizens. So we are bringing in all these measures through the National Evaluation Policy in strengthening inclusion throughout the evaluation phase, in particular stressing inclusion at even the planning phase where the voices of the marginalized can be heard. I think I will pause here and hand over to you, Chair. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Hauhela. It is indeed very inspirational to hear that the issues of inclusion and equity are addressed from the very beginning, from the policy framework and the planning stages. With this, Claudia, would you like to share your views, your nuanced opinion?
Yes, thank you very much, Tatiana, and thank you, Hauhela, for sharing that. There are a few things that I was going to cover, so allow me to make a few changes. As evaluators, we do work in a given frame, and this frame can be restrictive in terms of the evaluation focus, the scopes, the approaches, the methodologies, and even the intended uses of evaluation practice. So it would be naive to deny that these frames shape the way in which evaluations are used from the perspectives of evaluation practitioners as myself. However, these restrictive frames should not discourage us as evaluators to critically look at our own work and elevate the standards of our own evaluation practices to ensure the evidence we produce is useful for those that requested the evaluations to improve their work, but also to improve the lives of those whose rights have been violated, of those communities that are being part of the interventions we evaluate. As Sanjeev tells us, we need to ask us a question about what evaluations are or should be key to realize human rights. And more than that, how can our own evaluations contribute to the realization of human rights. So we as evaluators are in a very privileged space to amplify the voices of those that are not often heard. And it is our responsibility to make sure our methods, our approaches, and the methodologies we use are aligned with this. So again, we need to elevate the standards in which we work. And I am delighted to hear about the South African experience to advance institutionalization of the need to meaningfully stimulate the participation of communities. But as my colleague Hawelo just said, participation should be a part of the design, the data collection, the data analysis, the formulation of the recommendations to look at the future and see what the paths forward should be. And of course, to the dissemination of the evaluation results. And this point is key if we want to deliver evaluations that are useful and are used in the future, not only for those that requested them, but also for the society in general to advance the realization of human rights. So I would just leave it here for now, Tatiana.
Thank you very much, Claudia. Well said indeed. And with this, we move to Sanjeev.
Thank you. Thanks again. Exciting question. And for me, if the question was, can evaluation be a transformative tool for equity? The answer is an emphatic yes. Is there strong evidence that it has been a tool for equity? The answer is closer to a disagree or nuanced. Let me start by saying there's a lovely word aloha in Hawaii, where these conversations are not done in a yes or no way or agree, disagree. It has to be approached with the right aloha. My own view from this is, let's provide better examples of how has evaluation actually been a transformative tool. Whose lives have you improved with the evaluation itself being the intervention? I actually would argue the evidence is somewhat limited on that. We go through all the processes, but we have not built a record of saying, here are the 15 different ways we've improved the following people's lives. This is very real for me because of my colleagues in brain health and mental health who are right here with me. We're actually trying to design where can evaluation actually make a difference for diseases like dementia, like mental health, like Parkinson's, and what are some of the ways in which evaluations can contribute. My own view is we have to ask questions in which way too much of our fixation is with a single program. We don't ask in what ways is the program itself incomplete in making a difference in the lives of people. We don't ask enough questions about what works for whom and how do we bring in more of a heterogeneity lens into our programming. We don't actually have good ways of actually measuring people over time, etc. Again, a point I've raised, how do we ask tougher questions of criteria? Are our evaluation criteria enough to actually implement some of these human rights considerations we are talking about? How do we move beyond somewhat silly debates about design, RCT, clinical trials versus this, towards thinking in terms of ecology of evidence that can lead towards ecology of solutions? In what ways are our theories of change itself incomplete? And all of this has to be done in a frame that respects, I love this word, epistemic diversity. Different people think differently about problems. And I think too often we come in with a certain lens to say, this is the program, this is what the funder wants. We don't challenge the actual epistemologies of people who are proposing certain programs. So for all those reasons, I think it's best to be somewhat conservative about saying we've got a way to go.
Thank you very much, Sanjeev. Good, we have Jennifer to share her views with us.
So thank you, Tatiana and colleagues. The results of the poll is very disappointing. 70% is a very high number, and this tells me, as a practice, we have a lot of work to do. Within my office, we certainly work hard to see the transformative effects of evaluations on our human rights work. And this should be no surprise, because we have adopted a human rights-based approach to evaluations. We have worked with the United Nations Group, for example, to develop tools such as the UN guidelines on integrating human rights and gender into evaluations, and the more recent one on disability inclusion. A human rights-based approach to evaluation is a way of designing, and it's possible, and assessing programs, policies, or interventions that are explicitly grounded in international human rights standards and principles. Some of these principles, such as participation and inclusion, I think this has been mentioned by some of my fellow panelists, transparency, accountability, and equality and non-discrimination are some of the human rights principles that we deliberately integrate into evaluations. Evaluations with a human rights lens are about empowering people and empowering systems and improving systems, to ensure that the rights are respected in practice. Where relevant, they examine whether interventions reduce power imbalances, strengthen accountability, or promote empowerment. Instead of focusing only on whether activities were completed or targets met, the human rights-based approach examines whether people's rights were respected, protected, and fulfilled, and whether those with duties like the governments and institutions were held accountable. So this approach really shifts evaluation from did we deliver services to did we advance people's rights? Did marginalized groups benefit equally? Were human rights principles applied during implementation of the program? Are policies, laws, and institutions aligned with rights obligations? And if not, what do we need to do to ensure that it happens? If this approach is done well, we always have a transformative effect. And evaluation can be seen as a tool for social change. You know, human rights, we agitate, we push the envelope, and we ensure that these kinds of questions are always included in the evaluator's approach to evaluating our projects and programs. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Jennifer. Let me try to summarize this short but very rich and deep discussion. I will be quoting some of you, and I will be also trying to use my own words to link the thoughts together. So I think an important point that I would like to start with is what Sanjeev was saying, whether evaluation can be a tool for transformation, and can it be really the tool for advancing the human rights? And I think here the answer is very well defined, it's yes. But then we have tools for that, as many of you were saying, we have the frameworks, we have like everything that can support us in doing so. But whether we come to the second part of the question, whether it has been the transformative tool, here the answers and the ways to see the problem are a little bit more nuanced. And but at the same time, again, we kind of closing the loop, and we can say that there is limited evidence to that, yeah? But at the same time, many things are in our own hands, as Claudia was saying, like we can elevate the role that evaluation plays in advancing human rights through our methods that we apply in our evaluations, through elevating the standards. We can also broaden the perspective, as Sanjeev was alluding to, in terms of what are the criteria that we are using, whether they are sufficient or whether we are sort of intentionally boxing ourselves with those criteria. And when we are looking at the programs, whether we should start assessing whether the programs and the projects that we try to evaluate are broad enough to bring or to inspire the changes in life that we want to improve. Yeah, but I think I would like to finish with the thought that Claudia has left with me is really we need to start from ourselves. And the small things that we can do, each in our place, each in our role. And if we have the support, as an example from South Africa, from the institutional transformation that can support the role that evaluation needs to play in promoting and safeguarding the human rights, then hopefully we'll have more chances for success in this agenda. All right, good. With this, we are moving to our next part, which is diving deeper. We would like to ask our panelists to answer 4 specific questions, 1 question per panelist. And of course, you always have not more than 2 minutes, I guess. Yes, 1 minute this time for each of the answers. And I will start with Jennifer. It's nice to have you on the screen already. Your question: how can evaluation effectively promote accountability and facilitate learning among right holders and duty bearers in the context of human rights? You already started very well talking about this in the answer to your last question, but here you can expand and go deeper. Over to you, please.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes. Loud and clear.
If I did not, if I unmuted. Okay, so I believe that to truly promote accountability and learning, evaluations must be conducted in line with human rights principles. So let's dig a bit deeper, as you intimated, into what human rights principles enable. So if we take a few for the accountability principle, human rights evaluations assess whether duty bearers meet their legal and moral obligations. And by duty bearers, I mean governments, institutions, and service providers. Human rights programs usually make duties clear and measurable, and their evaluations provide evidence of compliance or violations. The transparency principle enables the publications of findings, which in itself contributes to accountability. All of our evaluations within OHCHR are publicly available on our website. So it makes it very difficult for duty bearers to claim compliance with international human rights norms and standards if it is in fact not the case. In terms of learning, we can look at the participation principle. By using inclusive and participatory evaluation methods and engaging a wide range of stakeholders, including both policymakers and marginalized groups, we remove barriers to participation. Sometimes evaluators, through their deliberate efforts to reach a wide range of stakeholders, make certain excluded groups aware of the benefits they were supposed to have received from a specific program. We give a voice to the voiceless, and we build the capacity of rights holders to feel empowered to claim their rights and empowered to advocate and eventually influence institutions to become vehicles for social change. The human rights framework encourages learning about how to design more inclusively and rights-respecting interventions in the future. With our own office, as part of our data collection and environmental scanning for the preparation of our 4-year strategic plan, we always conduct a meta-analysis of all the evaluations conducted in the previous years. I would say that this gives us a good indication of how we are doing and the learning from the things that did not go so well, and ensures that in the future, our programs are designed to not only fill gaps in compliance, but to respond to those lessons that we have learned and to continue to empower people, improve systems so rights are respected in practice. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Jennifer. Was again another very rich answer that I'm sure will leave a lot of food for thought in the hearts and the minds of our listeners. With this, we move to Sanjeev for their question. In what ways can evaluation practices actively promote the leaving no one behind imperative and address social justice concerns?
Thank you. Let me plug Madhulani Mayer's comments that she has on being somewhat skeptical about the leaving no one behind agenda. Let me start by saying there's much to be said about the leaving no one behind approach, but it should not become a slogan. It really has to be part of the reality of how we approach problems. The challenges I see is we've got a rather misplaced definition of what accountability is. It's an accountability to a funder for a specific program, as opposed to we are not being accountable to the very people we are intended to serve. let's go back to brain health and mental health. Just to fix it in your mind, like Parkinson's disease. The question that I think in my collaboration with Dancing with Parkinson's and Ontario Brain Institute is, how do we actually use evaluative thinking to actually ensure the fact that we are improving people's lives? That means going beyond a single program. And I think too often accountability is defined by this program works, that doesn't work, as opposed to this program is a collection of things that can make a difference for people who are having huge amounts of disadvantage itself too. So I think part of as we move towards making a difference in the lives of the most disadvantaged, how do we move beyond a single project or intervention as a unit of analysis? Uh, how do we kind of learn in a more longitudinal way? And again, brain health and mental health, and brain health being a neurodegenerative disease makes my point for me. I think we have to ask some tough questions. And in what ways have we gotten our methodologies wrong, where our insistent focus on what works at the project level, as opposed to how will we make a difference in the lives of different people? I think they're two different questions. And I think we need to approach it rather creatively. Again, how do we actually think about our measurement? Too often in the brain health world, the clinicians have one view of the world, the community folks have a different view of the world. How do we actually bring in a much more a perspective on thriving that respects the fact that this allows room for integration? Two other quick points. How does our evaluation surface questions of systems and barriers that promote the problem, that itself is the cause of the problem itself? So the intervention cannot do a whole lot. And again, I think we're too caught up in our different tools where we actually say, I'm a summative evaluator, I'm a developmental evaluator. I don't think we do a good enough job of mixing different tools, different purposes. And I think that's all required as we address an agenda of leaving no one behind.
Very good. Thank you very much. All right. However, the question to you is, what role does technology play in human rights-based evaluation, and how can it be leveraged to influence impactful policy reforms? What are the risks and opportunities in use of technology? Over to you, please.
Thank you so much for the excellent question. I think one would acknowledge that in particular in South Africa, we're still having a lot of divide in terms of who has access to technology and who is even able to use technology. So we take that into account in terms of the role that technology plays in evaluation, particularly when we want to engage community, ordinary citizens. But we are saying that technology is becoming a powerful enabler of human rights-based evaluation in South African national evaluation system. We do acknowledge that. It can help us in improving access to information, if I have to just start there, which in turn allows us to be held accountable by our citizens. Ourselves in the Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation in the Presidency of South Africa, we have a dedicated platform, a repository where we keep all our evaluations that we have undertaken since the National Evaluation System has been in existence in 2011. This is a way of us to making sure that citizens have access to the reports that we have produced or any other documents that we have produced. And not only to citizens, also to researchers that are really furthering the work that we are doing, civil society, to scrutinize government performance. And critically, we do acknowledge that making it easier and accessible in the right language, in the right way of disseminating it to our audience, be it at different education they are, is quite critical. Again, we acknowledge that technology can enable better and inclusive data gathering. We do acknowledge that we are now able to undertake our surveys digitally. We can do geospatial mapping. We can collect information using mobile devices that we have, and also other ways to engage as a way of engaging with rural communities, members in informal settlement, and also inclusive of persons living with disabilities. And in advancing this work, in the last 2 years, we released a clear guideline on how one can undertake evaluations virtually that we use as a mechanism to guide evaluators who are considering to bring on board technology during the evaluation processes, giving them various methods and tools that they can consider in incorporating technology. Again, we do acknowledge that technology allows us to monitor and also go to an extent of detecting human rights issues earlier. Through the geos mapping that we do, we are able to identify where there are service delivery gaps that are existing in our communities. And we do acknowledge that with the emergence of AI, for example, there is an opportunity for us that we can use AI in trying to map or uncover patterns of exclusions in terms of particularly resource allocation. Again, critically, technology plays a critical role because it allows us to get quick feedback from our citizens, being through digital feedback tools that we can use to get real-time feedback in terms of services that government is offering. But one of the critical elements that we do acknowledge is these opportunities exist. Technologies bring us all these opportunities, but it is very key that we take into account the responsibilities that we have when we use this technology. It is important that we safeguard against digital divide. As I said, in South Africa, this is still one of the critical challenges that we are having. And if we do not balance this quite well at this moment, it can be another way of perpetuating inequalities. Again, critical, we must ensure that we ensure data privacy and protection, especially of the vulnerable groups. And I know there is great work that colleagues in government have done to ensure that there is Personal Information Protection Act that we all adhere to, Act of 2013, the Protection of Personal Information Act that we have, that seeks to promote and protect personal information. So ultimately, for technology to support human rights-based approach, it must be used not only to collect data faster, because most of us, we think that's where it can contribute, but also to democratize evidence, to empower communities and amplify the voices that we are often silencing when policy are being made. So in South Africa, we see technology as a tool to strengthen transparency again, accelerate responsiveness, and also ensure that no group is rendered invincible, particularly in the evaluation process. Thank you so much. Handing over to you.
Thank you very much, Hela. This is indeed another inspirational example from South Africa. We have a lot to learn from. With this, we are moving to the question number 4. How can youth be co-creators in human rights-based evaluation to ensure their perspectives are integrated and valued? And naturally, we ask Claudia, as the former chair of the Eval Youth in Latin America and the Caribbean, to answer this question. Over to you, Claudia.
Many thanks, Tatiana and colleagues. I would just like to go back a bit to separate the question a bit to move towards answering. So the question has a couple of assumptions. Should youth participate in human rights-based evaluations, and why? And then we can start going over the how, if you allow me. So, should youth participate? Absolutely. They should participate, but the question to me is, in what terms should this participation be undertaken? And I think there are two key issues there. One is justice. See, youth is one of the groups that are being left behind, so they should be part of the conversation and they should be empowered to participate. But it's also a matter of quality of the work we do. And it is a matter of quality because including the perspectives of youth as well as other groups allows us a deeper understanding of our evaluand, a deeper understanding of change. So evaluation should propitiate the participation of the diverse groups of society, as we have been discussing on this space, that are directly or indirectly related to the intervention, but also it should allow the participation of people with many diverse perspectives to ensure we understand change in a way that allows a collective intelligence, if you allow me to use that word. So youth should be incorporated meaningfully in evaluation exercises, not only as sources of data, but also as part of this collective intelligence that I was telling you about that should sustain an evaluation exercise that aims to deeply understand the change, but also to challenge the limit of our current evaluation approaches, such as epistemic diversity, as Sanjeev was talking about, and the use of the necessary use of systemic approaches, the addressing of being complexity responsive, among many, many other changes that we need to make. So just to close, I wanted to acknowledge how youth bring passion, creativity, and deep commitment to social change when invited to participate meaningfully in evaluation exercises and many other exercises. And we, as evaluators, are called to put all this power into value by opening spaces for them to be a key part of evaluation teams, of participating meaningfully and deeply, and to be, as the question says, co-creators of any evaluation exercise that's speaking about human rights and the future of our societies and communities. I will leave it there for now, and I'm very happy to go deeper with questions afterwards, Tatiana.
Thank you very, very much, Claudia. Again, not an easy task to summarize in seconds all this richness of the exchange that we have just had. Let me maybe quickly share my own takeaway from one small idea from each of you. So I will start with Jennifer, and I think the most significant takeaway for me is that something that I have felt, but I have never managed to put it into the words, is that human rights make duties clear and measurable. And this is indeed so. And if we look at the evaluation and its role in advancing the human rights from this perspective, many things become much more difficult and complex, but at the same time easier, because it allows us to be more specific. And I love the word measurable. It speaks to my M&E soul. If we go further and look at what Sanjeev shared with us, it's even more striking, but this is also very interesting because it's the continuation of the same topic. The principle or the imperative of leaving no one behind should not become a motto. It should be embedded in everything that we are doing. I would not say any more on this. And then as I said, the experience from South Africa, thank you very much for sharing, Hella. This was indeed, again, another very insightful learning for me personally. Mainly because of the way that you framed it and the way that you presented it. The technology is a powerful enabler, indeed, for many reasons, but also it comes with responsibilities. Beautifully put. Thank you very much for this. And Claudia, I think I love your closing remark on the question that you were answering about the role that and the part that youth and their role as the co-creators in human rights-based evaluation is that they bring, I put it down for myself, passion, creativity, and deep commitment to social change. You can't say better. Thank you very much for this. All right, we are moving on. And now this is the long anticipated time for audience reflections. Again, just to remind everyone who is listening to us, you can put your comments and questions through LinkedIn. But if you are listening to us in the Zoom, you have a Q&A button to ask your questions and share your comments. All right, let me open this and see what we have here. You can also, yes, indeed, you can also raise your hands, and we have about like 10 minutes probably or so. And dear panelists, if you see some of the questions in the Q&A forum that you would like to pick and answer, feel free to do so. Okay, let me see. So I chose a nuance to you. Sometimes we design evaluations without including all the relevant voices and data collection due to time and resource constraints. But if our programming is meant to improve lives for the most vulnerable, we should ensure their voices are captured throughout. How do we realistically balance this? I think Sanjeev and also Jennifer, you spoke quite a lot about this, and even Claudia, in your last answer to the last question, you also covered this quite well. Let me see whether we have more burning questions, so to speak. How might evaluation systems be transformed so that evidence becomes a tool of community power, legible and useful for citizens, shaped by their priorities and accountable primarily to them rather than to external funders? Okay, Sanjeev, I see you would like to answer this question. Please go ahead.
I think the critical question is there's not a single problem in the world that is going to be solved without the active participation of communities. And more often than not, I'm not entirely sure in our theories of change, the communities are clearly a part of this. Brain health comes to mind. Doesn't matter what the hospital does, but people have to go home, and the communities have a role to provide a more supportive response. So, a couple of points. And this really goes to the other question. I think much of our engagement process is not rigorous. We don't actually, I've not seen a single evaluation where we say, very often they'll be say, we talk to 100 people, etc. I very rarely see an evaluator that says, this is how our theory of change changed as a result of thinking about. The community just becomes a much more rubber stamper. So I don't want to take too much time, but really, how do we build an evaluative process that the evaluation itself is not rigorous? If you don't actually provide proof that the engagement actually was genuinely transformative. We use the word transformative a little bit too easily. More often than not, it's a little bit of a validation. That's one. Two is, how do we actually think about context itself as a measure of a rigor of an evaluation? We're too caught up in debates on measurement and design. You actually don't know anything about my community. What are you doing? I think we have to be far more clearer about this. Three, don't use slogans like leave no one behind, etc., without showing proof that you've actually challenged your own perspectives on this. Otherwise, it doesn't just become a tool for evaluation, it becomes a tool for oppression. So we have to be very mindful of all this, but all of it really requires us to rethink what's a good evaluation. I'm just not convinced we've actually addressed that question.
Thank you very much, Sanjeev. I would like to go back to the first question, because I guess we can also benefit from the answer that Claudia can provide to this on air. How do we ensure that voices of the most vulnerable are captured throughout? Claudia, over to you.
Thank you, Tatiana. And complementing what Sanjeev just said, I think participatory processes, we as evaluators call many different things as participatory processes. So we need to agree a quality standard that is responsive to culture, that is responsive to cultural contexts, to gender, to the age of people, that's the life cycle, among many others. And we need to build a process that is more rigorous and keep accountable to this process, because participation is key, but we need to take it seriously. If we invite people to the table, we need to be sure we go back to them and we tell them what the results of the research, of the evaluation is, what it can be useful. We make sure we can connect them with people that should keep the process going if necessary, for example, in the cases we're working in laws or any other changes. And I think this goes to the two things. One is, as evaluators, how do we design the process and make sure the process happens? How do we implement it? But also, how do we negotiate this with evaluation commissioners? Because they are the institution that's inviting people to participate. They're the ones that should remain accountable and committed to participation. And this is not an easy issue for everyone. So once you open the door, you need to be welcoming people. You cannot open the door and then just close it. So I would say that attention to the process and how do we implement it, to use the proper methods to make sure we remain responsive to complexity, context, to culture, to gender, to everything that needs to be taken into account. And regarding one other question that was there, and just very quick, I think we need to adapt our processes to make sure they're welcoming for everyone. If we think that if we're not, I mean, if people are not understanding what we're saying, it's because we are not being clear enough. If we're having a participatory process, we need to adapt the ways in which we work to welcome people and to make sure we take the most out of their participation into the process, and to keep also accountable to them, as I just said, Tatiana. I hope it was clear. I'm sorry if it's not. I would love to go deeper if needed.
Okay, thank you very much, Claudia. To me, it was clear, but I know one answer to a question always brings more questions if you're really passionate about the subject and about the problem, the issue. But I would like to move on, and we have a very interesting question for Jennifer. How do we deal with situations where beneficiaries are not technically equipped to understand evaluation processes? Is it possible that this may cause the participatory evaluation be just a tick box process rather than be meaningful? Over to you, Jennifer.
Thank you, Tatiana. And I think my commentary on this question is probably going to continue on a bit from what Sanjeev and Claudia have said. I think I did mention earlier on that sometimes you have an evaluator addressing a program or a project and talking to people who had no idea that they were even part, or they were supposed to be part of this project or part of the beneficiaries. So I think the problem starts in terms of the participation from the design of the intervention. And if they are not included in the design, it is very difficult to have them included in the evaluation. But, if the evaluation is to be transformative, we can use this opportunity to try to be really creative and include the persons and their perspectives. But how do we do that? There's been a lot of questions. Let's not use LNOB as a tick box. Let's not use, how do we sit down and figure out with the communities what is the best way? How do they communicate as a community? Would they be able to fill out a questionnaire? Probably not, depending on where the community is located, and depending on the social background. They may not be able to fill out a questionnaire, but they may be able to tell you stories. In OHCHR, we have been experimenting with, and this is not something that's new, but we've been trying to use things like forum theater and legislative theater to bring people in who communicate differently so that we can get their perspectives. And it takes a lot of thinking and willingness to be creative in the evaluation process to design these participatory measures that will make communities feel included and will enable you to hear their voice. So I'm saying this can be very difficult, it can be very challenging, and we can throw up all the problems. But I think we need to sit creatively with the community, with the communities. And it may not be the same for every community. It may be different, but just co-create with them, find out, what's the best way to get the information from them, and then move on from there. Over.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. I also would like to invite Helle to complement some other answers in addition to what other panelists have shared. But also, if you would like to pick any additional question that you see on the Q&A section, feel free to do so, because, for example, I see a lot of questions about technologies, about the use of AI and the restrictions related to technologies that are imposed by the governments, etc., etc. So feel free to sum up your answer to cover several questions that you have seen there. And then we will have Sanjeev. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I wanted to touch on the issue of the evaluation criteria. We have adopted, recently South Africa has adopted 2 criteria that we are making mandatory for all evaluations that are undertaken in government, the transformative equity and the climate ecosystem health. And for those that are interested, we have a clear guideline on how one can use them available on our website. They can access those guidelines there. But I wanted to touch on the issue that Claudia spoke about in terms of bringing the, if I could put it this way, youth into the evaluation process. So for us, it is mandatory for each evaluation to have an oversight committee, like a steering committee, and we see an opportunity of bringing them at that level, because that committee plays a critical role in terms of ensuring that the evaluation process is followed accordingly, and finally the report is approved and there is adequate dissemination and information sharing coming out, and also ensuring holding government accountable in terms of implementing the recommendation. So involving young people and also people from underserved communities, if we are focusing on a particular community, it's quite critical, as I said earlier on, throughout the process. This is one thing that we acknowledge. But for us, it's more critical also to ensure that they don't just come as participants, they also come as part of the designers and the planners of the particular evaluation. Like for instance, currently we are working on developing our national evaluation plan, bringing on board the voices of young people, the marginalized. We see it as quite critical, where we don't only just sit amongst ourselves as technocrats and say, this is what is emerging from our monitoring reports to say we need to evaluate this program, but also bring the lived experiences of communities on board to decide what we need to focus on. Because sometimes what we get from what is emerging from our evidence and also what is reality tend to differ a little bit. But in terms of bridging the digital divide, I know my colleagues in the Department of Communication are working very hard to try and ensure that they improve access to digital technology for the marginalized communities. I know we work very closely with the private sector here, because there are still communities where they really don't have access to technology and they're not able to use them quite extensively. And if you realize, in the last 2 years, some of the projects that we have undertaken, we tried to incorporate technology where it was doable, but in some instances, methods that we're using, we had to use dual methods where you would do your focus group online, and sometimes you had to still do them physically, taking into account the digital divide that is still existing. I think I just wanted to add that to you. Over to you, Tanya.
Thank you very, very much, Hela. And then Sanjeev, I think you have a bunch of different questions. So if you can briefly touch each of them. I know that it's difficult to provide exhaustive answers in such a short time frame, but over to you, so that at least we have some answers to those burning questions from our participants. Over.
Let me start with Jake's question, which says, what stops funders or similar from directing evaluations to be a tool for community power? In a word, maybe in a small sentence, a lack of humility. Too much of, I work in the university and I'm struck by how much university folks pretend they actually understand community context. And I think we need a complete radical humility in actually bringing community as part of the solutioning. There are other parts to this question itself, to that I can go on, but I think it goes back to the notion of my epistemology. I know the world better than you do, and I think that leads to an epistemic injustice. I think the role of community for sustainability. We're too caught up in an impact paradigm. We don't actually think about what will it take to sustain impacts. And I think about Dancing with Parkinson's, for example, where the community has a really critical role in solving problems over time. I can go on, but I think we have to also challenge who decides what's good evidence, etc. So I think there are huge issues of power, but I want to throw in the fact that there's a worldview in terms of asymmetry of evidence itself. Where I think right now we invest in large pharmaceutical companies to test out drugs for brain health. We don't do the same in community. So I'll stop it there. Let me give others a chance to answer, and then I'll come back if you'd like.
Thank you very much, Sanjeev. I'm afraid that we need to wrap up because we are almost at the cream of finishing, and we don't want to delay the webinar. We don't want to abuse everyone's time. So we move to the rapid fire section, and this is going to be like really rapid. In this section, I would like to ask you, dear panelists, to invite each of you to share one concrete takeaway or call to action for anyone that you think is a key stakeholder in the process of evaluation. VOPs, donors, UN, government, civil society, communities, experienced to young evaluators, and users of evaluation, of course. What is one key message you'd like the audience to walk away with? One important idea to remember or act on? Or maybe there's something you would like to take away with you from this discussion. We'd love to hear it. 30 seconds for each of you. Over. Shall we start with Sanjeev, since you're already on the screen?
Yes. I just want to really talk to young evaluators. It's a great time to be an evaluator. It's what a fantastic opportunity to think about the wild class of problems and a field that has still not resolved some critical questions, including questions of how do we understand people's context? How do we bring about change in people's lives? How do we integrate solutions? I think it's an inspiring time to be an evaluator. Let's stop there.
Very nice. Thank you very much, Sanjeev. Jennifer, would you like to go next?
Yes, I can. For me, we are all engaged in areas of work to improve the lives of people, whether it is in the peace and security realm, whether we're doing development or we're doing human rights work. We are all working towards achieving results. Evaluations provide us with a sound methodological process and an independent view of whether or not these results have been achieved. They allow us to course correct, to learn from experience, and to design more effective programs. In the current financial context, some evaluation functions within the UN system is at risk. Some organizations have already cut evaluations from their programs. We have to fight to ensure that our organizations retain the evaluation function. This is not the time to cut the only function that tells you whether or not you are achieving results and making a difference in people's lives. So my call to action is for us to work together to ensure that these functions are safe and secure for the future. Over.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Jennifer. I see Hela next on my screen. Would you like to take the floor?
Thank you so much. I think for me, what I'm taking away, and in line with the responsibility of our office of institutionalizing the South African National Evaluation System, we need to acknowledge that a human rights-based evaluation system is where everyone counts and every voice matters, and where evidence becomes a tool for justice, not for assessment. Let's strive to be inclusive. Let's try to bring on board the previously marginalized. I think that's my key message. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well said. Fantastically well said. Hela and Claudia, over to you for your final takeaway.
Thank you. Yeah, well, building on what my colleagues said, I think this is incredibly challenging times. And in these times, we need more than ever transformational evaluation. Transformational evaluation requires shifting power, and we should start by ourselves. So, humility, as Sanjeev was calling out, and the value of day-to-day life experience of people, individuals, communities, everywhere is a great way to start to build towards more epistemic justice as a base for more transformational evaluation. That's what's my challenge for my own practice, and that's what I'm taking home after this conversation, and it's very valuable and challenging for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sharon, Claudia. And with this, let me use another maybe 1 minute to close our session today. And I would like to sincerely and warmly thank all the panelists for your openness, for sharing your views, for this richness of discussion that we have had. And I hope, on behalf of all of us here, that as we observe Human Rights Day, we are committed even more to evaluation that is locally led, ethical, and firmly grounded in human rights, as we were saying today. The evaluation that prevents harm, challenges inequity, and strengthens dignity and justice for all. Before we all leave, don't forget to register for our next Future of Evaluation dialogue that will take place on the 22nd of January 2026, honoring the International Day of Education. We will be exploring how evaluation education must evolve to remain relevant in a rapidly changing world. The registration link is in the chat. And please stay tuned. The recording of today's session will be soon available on YouTube and LinkedIn. So along with a short article capturing the key insights. For all updates, resources, and future events, make sure to visit LinkedIn and our Eval for Action website. So we will also appreciate your feedback on this session. So please do take a minute for a very brief 3-question and survey. Thank you once again, and see you next month.